you know how frustrating it is when you run into a rage quitter online when you're grinding for points, which don't matter, but also that sweet, sweet LP defines us as human beings, and we all know it. And you know that right when you're gonna win and you get super pissed off, I have found a way around it, and I think I am doing the Street Fighter community a justice with this next kind of segment that I want to do. When someone rage quits, we're doing the segment called Bitch Ass Rage Quitters of the Week.
Bitch Ass Rage Quitters
of the Week. And so what this is when this happens to me, instead of getting all those negative feelings of like, oh, you wasted my time and I totally beat you, and especially if it was close, when it's close and you rage quit, like is there no warrior spirit respect? Right. No. And so I want to expose these people and shame them publicly on the YouTube, so that they will be, well, you know, not as likely to maybe do it to other people in the future. And now when someone rage quits on me, I just go, awesome, content for the podcast. Write it down. Don't forget what their name is. So this week's Bitch Ass Rage Quitters was an Alex player named Gatsu_Thor. Shame on you. Your Alex is whack. And then an Akuma player by the name of Flying Schlong. Which, thank you for the very entertaining name.
Can you be upset about a guy with the name Flying Schlong rage quitting on you? Because I mean, you kind of expect it with that name.
We want to facilitate a community of people that are fun to play with, that get invited back next time we play, and that kind of approach to things. Like, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. No, none of that here. So anyways, Gatsu
you mean
Thor,
take your Flying Schlong and go home?
Take your
yes.
Man, this YouTube venture was fun while it lasted, guys.
Yeah.
that's the ultimate payback, is that he or she is gonna get on me, is that they got us canceled on YouTube for Flying Schlong. So anyways, shame on you guys. Now I mean, do you think that people are going to react with like, oh, you shouldn't be shaming people, and that's a negative thing? You know what? Like this video if you think it's wrong of us to shame people, and then comment below if you think that this is a good idea. And hey, if you want to share people that rage quit against you in the comments, we'd love to hear about it. We will publicly shame them as well with thumbs up on your comments. So, anyways, that was this week's Bitch Ass Rage Quitters.
Bitch Ass Rage Quitters
of the Week.
All right, there it is. I just have to throw it out there, John, that I don't get rage quitted on because I play Rose in a swimsuit costume, and it shows her butt really, really, really well when you win, and so no one rage quits on me.
I will say that both of these rage quits was while I was playing Nikali, not
of course
Sexy Thong Ryu. Which, if you missed that video, that's probably the best video we've done thus far. So be sure to check it out. I'm sure there's a link that I will put in the future from now in the comments present for you guys. Anyways,
I have to mention, one of our commenters said like, hey Catalyst, do you know that Poison's transgender and you're like thirsting after her? And I'm like, yes. you know I work on an FGC website.
You know he wears
right?
makeup, guys. Gosh. And it's fine.
Yeah, she's freaking hot. She's gorgeous. She looks like Christina Hendricks. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. She's freaking a knockout. But
we love everybody here on EventHubs except for rage quitters. You guys
except
suck.
for Nikali. Yeah. I'm so sorry. I couldn't resist. Let's get on with our other subject, John, before I get fired from the show. Anyway, if you see this guy of Catalyst rage quit against you, don't put him on the show, please, because anyway, yes. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Slightly less important orders of business. And also I wrote the rage quitter's name on this little notepad, and I so want to just keep doing it on the desk as if I'm organizing it. It's just a single piece of paper. I'm not even organizing, but it feels great to do that. Just wanted to let you guys know. Okay. First official segment of the day. When should we expect Street Fighter 6 to be announced / released? Answers for both of those things today. And this is something we actually visited. Gosh, it was like 2 years ago. Can you believe that? We're old. 2 years ago, and this has been something that the community has obviously been thinking about. The reason I was sort of ushered toward this topic for the week is that as fun as Street Fighter V has become, especially here in the fifth season, and after the recent updates, and man, characters like Nash are suddenly winning and Cammy's not in every top 8. Things along those lines. It's really good. It's fun to play. Getting out there and starting to play some casuals again with in person with people. The game's in a really good spot, and it also feels like this has been around for 5 years. And when's SF6 is part of where the community is at. And so I do want to look forward and see, we'll enjoy this last chapter of SF5, which might be for a little bit longer than maybe we want it to be. But hey, them's the breaks, and we did just have COVID probably delaying things and such. But when is SF6 coming? I think that's something that people are worried about. First, I got to start with, we have had no official announcements or references or anything from Capcom saying that there even is an SF6. This is all just rumors, leaks, speculation, but there's probably an SF6 coming, guys. Come on, it's the Street Fighter franchise, and fighting games are doing pretty well right now. So,
yeah, I just want to highlight that you said no official. Yeah, we have plenty of unofficial confirmation.
Well, that's what I'm getting right into. Thanks for the segue. So yes, it was in August of 2020. In fact, it's specifically August 6th of 2020, last year, where a rumor popped up that SF6 was slated for a 2021 release, but was delayed due to poor reception from testers. And this is where we heard, I believe it was from who normally does Resident Evil leaks, Aesthetic Gamer, also known as Dusk Golem, put out a string of tweets that talked about it and said, as Capcom is trending for Street Fighter stuff, though I'm not really a Street Fighter fan, I can mention I know the reason for the unexpected Street Fighter V Season Pass. The most basic gist of it is Street Fighter 6 was supposed to release next year, which would have been 2021, but it was not received well internally or with testers. There's this team mechanic the game was too focused on. The director, who was Ono, got demoted again, and someone else was put in charge to fix Street Fighter 6 with an additional year in development, and the new season pass is to buy time for that. And that, of course, would be what we're going through right now, the Season 5 pass with Dan Rose, Oro, Akira. Goes on to say, for what it's worth, I've heard the extra year and new director/fixes and direction they've taken it have been doing wonders. Ono was the director for SF6, but the game didn't come out good. Well, that's my little edit there. The new director, I don't know much about, but here she's pretty well known to the fighting game community, brought some really cool ideas to fix the game with what was there. Okay, so that came out on August 6th. It was nothing official. That's just a leak from someone who's, they called I think the werewolves in Resident Evil 8, and has a reputation of hits and misses and such. But then it was just a few days later, I think it was, August 5th. 4 days later, Ono announces that he will be leaving Capcom. That's not a direct confirmation that all of this was true, but this is a mention of, hey, things are tumultuous with Ono. He's been demoted, I guess, twice, according to what's been said here. And we have seen that, and we documented that, too, when it happened a few years ago. And sure enough, Ono's kind of out, and so that's a little bit of a backing to this idea. But again, just a rumor/leak. But then, fast forward to November 18th. Street Fighter 6 leaked through recent Capcom hack. You guys remember that pretty big hack that happened? At the time, we weren't sure, but it came out later that Capcom did confirm that they were hacked, and that was, I think, like a full terabyte of information was taken. And among that information was a reference to Street Fighter 6. Now, it wasn't a ton, but it did say... Ragnar has just released more onto the internet, this time including emails regarding hashtag Street Fighter 6. Emails itself seems to be about the progression of 3D modeling. It's basically there was a reference to Street Fighter 6 according to this leak, and according to someone who knew about the leak on Twitter. Name was PokeProtos. So again, nothing official, but a reference to it. And again, Capcom did get hacked. We confirmed that. They confirmed that. A lot of information was stolen, and this very well could have been part of that whole thing. Any reactions?
There's another leak. that had a spreadsheet of like release dates of games that were later confirmed. I think the new Phoenix Wright trilogy that's coming out like next month, or Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, sorry, and a few other things that kind of like later surfaced. And so Street Fighter 6 was in there. I mean, plus, we've gotten indirect confirmation, both you and I, from speaking with Capcom, that Street Fighter 6 is coming. But anyone could have predicted that, right?
Right.
I mean, we have official confirmation. It's pretty much just a matter of when. But yes, it's in the works. Anyone could have called it, but there it is.
So that leaves us with, when might it be? And one of the things we know is that it usually takes Capcom about 3 years to develop a game, and that's coming from them. They've said that, and we ran a story on that back in October of 2019. Man, research is so easy to do with this kind of stuff now, and I just appreciate it. It's great.
John, isn't it amazing that there's an FGC website that's not out of business and actually keeps its archives up there that you can easily search, like EventHubs? I don't know. Anyway. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go on with the
yes,
research.
all those things you said, I agree with that. Yeah,
EventHubs says great. Yeah, it's not about that. So anyway,
comment if you agree. It takes about 3 years to develop a game. Also, they tend to come out in February for Capcom fighting game releases. Just a quick refresher of that. SF2 came out in February of 91, Super Turbo, February of 94, Street Fighter 3, February of 97, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, February of 2000, Street Fighter 4, February of 09, MVC 3, February of 2011, and then of course SF5, Feb of 2016. And it makes enough sense, especially nowadays with the Capcom Pro Tour being what it is. You've got the season of the Capcom Pro Tour up until this point has been through usually about March through December. That's when Capcom Cup will normally happen. Then you got January, February, the first part of March to kind of have the off season, and that's a pretty good time for a new game to come out. Gives players a month or so, month and a half to start getting used to it before the CPT kicks off for the following year and such. And so
also a big deal for Capcom releasing it in February is it's March, I think, is the end of their fiscal year. And from a business perspective, since I run taxes and do all the financials and stuff for EventHubs, it is there's a big boon of getting certain financials in a certain window, and that's how come Capcom has hardcore release dates. And what I mean by hardcore release dates is if it's done or not, sometimes it gets released then because it makes fiscal sense for them to do it. That's how come you see this window very hardcore.
Yeah, so God, if it's done or not, Street Fighter 5, nightmares and shudders and but okay, so they're probably going to base it around the CPT. And so I would think February-ish is kind of, or at least the early part of the year, first 2 or 3 months of a year, is when you're probably going to see the game actually released. Now, obviously, that would mean that 2021's sort of off the table. You go, well, maybe 2022, maybe they delayed it just by a year, because again, if we're going by what that first leak said, that they were going to launch it this year, well, maybe they just kick back 1 year. That sounds good, except for the fact that if you look at the battle map that maps out their plans for release of the Season 5 content, the last panel there, it says New Balance and CPT 2022 costumes and stage for SF5 coming out in the fall of 2021, which to me kind of screams that there will be another Pro Tour featuring Street Fighter 5 in 2022. Does that compute with you, though? I don't want to go 100%. Too fast over that. Yeah.
It's Capcom, ideally, when they don't Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite something, they like to have about a year worth of marketing with it. And I'm giving Capcom a lot of crap here. Let me also state this, that I know there are a ton of great people at Capcom that do incredible work. And there's some people that are not there anymore who had some mixed opinions about them, who maybe would push games out a little too fast and do other things. And there's a lot of politics at Capcom. Any AAA gaming company has got a lot of politics behind the scenes and all that. I would not call Capcom an easy place to work at, but working with their IPs, you have some of the best IPs in video games.
Can't argue.
Yeah, and so there it's a mixed thing, but you've also seen a lot of people work at Capcom and go on to have very nice careers elsewhere, because working there it's you're high up on the chain of influential video game companies
Hmm.
basically. So it's there's some really good and some really bad things at Capcom, but there it is. So I'm thinking about a year of marketing. I think you're about to get into when it's going to be announced and other stuff like that. But usually they like to have about a year of marketing these games
Well,
when
with
after
that,
they're announced.
yeah. So I would think about the same lines. Now, I'm not super restricted to that window of like it would need to be a full year before it was actually released, because man, that's a while. But also in the gaming world, what we got like I remember God of War, the most recent one. I remember seeing stuff about that, and it was like 3 years later when it actually came out, and that's just sort of how things work in the gaming world in modern times. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing for a pretty early announcement compared to when it actually drops. But I'm thinking if we're gonna have Street Fighter V for the rest of this year and then the rest of another year. I mean, it's like the fifth character comes out, and then there's a new balance patch, so it's kind of a newish game again, and then they're gonna have CPT content for it. We're probably gonna get the announcement for Street Fighter 6 as early as I would say, would you say at Capcom Cup? Because that's a big
Most likely, yeah.
stage, right? That's
No,
and it's at the right-ish time. But that's like
we
13, 14 months before it would release if it comes out into February. But go ahead.
no, we did talk about potentially E3 being a thing. Obviously, that didn't happen. We've all put our money on Capcom Cup, just to be clear. But there is stuff like the Tokyo Game Show. I believe that happens September every year. There's a few other kind of odd things, but usually they save it for Capcom Cup.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised, all that surprised, even if they did it at like an Evo, which who knows what Evo is going to be like. It's coming back this year, but it's still online. I don't know if that's really your spot for it or not. But as
Yeah.
far as timing goes, and this would be next year. So who knows if Evo's probably going to be back in person by next year, but we'll see. That would put it in like August. So what is that? 6 months before? That would be an acceptable window. So maybe an Evo reveal wouldn't be the craziest thing. But in terms of reveal, I would say in the earliest we're going to see is early next year. We'll get an announcement for Street Fighter 6, possibly at the end of this year, if for Capcom Cup itself. But it could be as late as an Evo. But I think next year we're going to see the announcement, and then the following February of 2023,
Yeah.
for Street Fighter 6 is when I would guess, based on this information, that's when we're going to actually have it in our hands and find out that all the damage is way too high because it's the vanilla version of a Street Fighter game. And
Why would Strive have that happen? I mean, why would Street Fighter have that happen, John?
now,
I
okay,
don't know. Yeah.
okay, I was actually talking with the guys because at last night we do our weekly sessions a lot on Tuesdays, and Strive is clearly has a big presence right now. And yes, the damage there is big, and I of course compared it to, we've seen that in pretty much all of the, at least the recent Street Fighter games, and I assume it was probably pretty close to that in previous ones. It seems to be a trend. But as high as the damage output is, there's an argument that immediately comes up that that's okay because of all of the defensive options that you have, the burst and the like the just defends and such. It's like, yeah, you get hit though, it's your fault in a certain sense. Where maybe if it doesn't feel that way like in the Street Fighter games, it's a problem. But there is a way to balance that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do hear that Strive is pretty gnarly when it comes to damage output. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
I we'll see if they don't dial that back here. That's the typical vanilla fighting game releases where damage is just too high, and then they
Hmm.
dial it back. Almost every game does that.
Right.
But you were mentioning Street Fighter 6, so back to there. I'm gonna rapid fire this stuff here real quick. COVID-19,
Hmm.
all the leaks and other stuff like that. The game changing directions, all this kind of stuff. Like this is all like. It makes sense that the game would be a little bit delayed. Oh, and of course, the semiconductors, PC parts, all that kind of stuff. You can barely buy a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, S, whatever one right now. And that would kind of be the target console for this new game, right? Like
Hmm.
it might be backwards compatible, but they're building it on next generation hardware. And if people can't even get their hands on the next generation hardware until maybe even 2022, and even then, like, are a lot of people going to buy it because it's probably still going to be fairly scarce, right?
Mhm.
There's a bunch of reasons why Street Fighter 6 actually makes a little bit of sense to kind of delay it a little bit more than people might be anticipating, because unless it's targeted for this generation, which it shouldn't be, the PlayStation 4 and, Xbox One, it's
Nice.
kind of, it just makes sense. And so everyone's kind of ramping up with this right now. Like all the FGC developers are kind of, they're talking, if they've got a product coming out soon, like King of Fighters 15 and stuff, like they're talking about this stuff right now. But for a lot of people, it seems like, the target is going to be like, when are these next generation consoles going to be kind of a thing? And next generation, they're here, kind of thing. And we're still talking about them as like next gen, right? Because they're so
Mhm.
scarce. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of the rapid fire. Like, there's a lot of good reasons for Capcom to have this come out in 2023 instead. And again, I'm fine with Street Fighter 5. I'm fine with Rose. Like, let's keep it here for a little while. There it is.
I agree. And I mean, I think that the swell and the excitement for Street Fighter 6 and what that looks like, I'm really looking forward to that and seeing what it does for the community. But I mean, it'll come when it comes. And if we learned any lesson from the release of Street Fighter 5, it's that don't rush this stuff, please. So if it takes that much time, take that much time. And if you need to do it in February and it's not ready for February 22, do it in February 23. Fine, fair enough. But please don't release a halfway finished game and have to be fighting to just get back to even for so long. And also, we have seen delays in other games. Like you said, King of Fighters 15's delayed. Guilty Gear Strive was heavily delayed. So it makes sense. There's a lot of turbulence. It's understandable. Get your game out when it's ready to go.
Yeah, get it when it's ready.